China has emerged from the 20th century as a strong and unified nation, with one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Its rapidly growing middle class has benefited from continual increases in income, designer brand products, and standards of living. The relentless pace of development has turned villages to towns, towns to cities, and cities to bustling metropolises. And yet, all is not well in this seemingly harmonious society.
Authorities in Shanghai have closed a dairy company and arrested 3 executives after milk products were found to contain high levels of the toxic industrial chemical melamine.
Food safety has been a persistent problem in China in recent years. Beijing-based New Century magazine reports that between 10 to 60% of rice sold in 6 regions in China contain cadmium.
Nearly 90% of the fruits and vegetables they tested were contaminated with at least one harmful pesticide.
The story broke that China's largest producer of pork products had been purchasing pigs given the illegal supplement clenbuterol.
Law enforcement officials in Shanghai are scrambling to hose down yet another food scandal.
If you're planning a trip to China, you may want to stay away from the fresh fruits and vegetables.
Many people here are very concerned about what they're eating.
How did food safety become such a big issue in China? Perhaps we should begin by examining where the food comes from. Although China has gone through significant economic development, many of its people are still working in agriculture. In the last century, they embraced the use of pesticides. While most of the pesticides they currently use are relatively safe, a few are not. According to a study conducted by researchers at Zhejiang University, up to 23.9% of farmers in China may be using highly toxic pesticides. These farmers tended to be older, less educated, and unaware that the pesticides they used were bad. They usually dealt with handlers who only cared about quantity, not quality. However, these farmers only account for part of the problem, for there are 2 larger forces at work. Much of the contamination occurs here, in the food processing companies that prepare and package the food before it is sold to the masses. You might ask why such companies would deliberately put dangerous chemicals into their products. The answer is simple: greed.
Melamine is a toxic chemical used for making plastic. When added to food, it can make the protein content appear higher.
Clenbuterol, also known as lean meat powder, is given to the pigs to create leaner muscle tissue.
By manipulating food to make it seem more healthy or nutritious, food companies can charge higher prices, and in a market as large as China, a few extra cents per pound can quickly scale into millions of dollars. Of course, there's quite a bit of contamination from industrial sources as well.
Researchers say contamination happens when industrial waste pollutes the soil and metals like cadmium and lead are absorbed by rice crops. Researchers found most of the contaminated rice in southern China, where industrial activity is more concentrated.
The other significant source of food problems is the lack of government regulation. Although China has a food safety code, it has not been adequately enforced. As noted by Scott Rizzo, local officials in charge of enforcing these kinds of standards are also expected to maintain production quotas. Since the rewards for the latter are much higher, many chose to forgo their responsibilities and turn a blind eye. To make matters worse, many government officials are connected to the companies they are supposed to watch, either through bribes or personal connections. This unfortunate situation leaves victims of food contamination with nowhere to turn. While China's food safety situation is less than ideal, it can be improved. According to the Zhejiang University study, the use of toxic pesticides among farmers will decrease if they are given access to education and wholesale markets. Meanwhile, recent government actions have strengthened regulations for food and industrial companies while dealing stricter punishments to those who break the safety codes. At the same time, news agencies are using the internet to help people avoid potentially dangerous food products. And yet there is still more to be done. Corruption and pollution are still major problems for the Chinese people, and every year new food scandals emerge. Food safety remains an elusive goal for China, and unless drastic changes are made, it will remain out of reach.
But it is going to be a long process, and a process through which the Chinese government is going to have to work very hard to restore the confidence of ordinary people in the food that they eat.